Hello and welcome to Pickle's Garage. Today I'm going to show you how to remove these C3500 drums. They're a little bit more complicated than your average drum, so I will go over the finer points here. You'll notice that I already have it safely lifted and I have removed my wheel here, so if you have not done that, go ahead and grab that and I will show you the next step. Alright, so we're going to start by removing the axle here. So if you wanted to try and break these loose before you took off the rim itself, that's helpful. What you can also do is if you have a strong enough impact, you can go ahead and do them right now. If you need to break them loose and maybe you have a Ryobi like me, then I would just pop on the parking brake real quick and that'll hold it well enough for you to go ahead and break it loose. This size is going to be 3/4, right? Just something like that. I usually use a breaker bar just so I don't break my stuff. And if you have a pipe that you could put on top of it, then you'll get more leverage just to make it a little longer and a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and crack all these loose, and then I'm going to finish it off with the impact. Just don't forget, once you remove all of these, to go ahead and remove your parking brake. Otherwise, you're going to have a heck of a time getting the drum off. There's the smell of that gear oil. Alright, so at this point we're going to go ahead and take out the axle here, so it's good to have a bucket of sorts down here because there should be some fluid. There's likely going to be a fair amount on the shaft as well, so if you have gloves or if you want to grab a rag, that's great. Once you pull it straight back, try not to twist it too much because the splines are actually going to be in your diff, so you're not going to be able to turn it too much, so you have to kind of pull it straight back. But if you want to get something to sort of crack this with the liquid gasket, then that works as well. And then we're just going to put a rag on the splines so nothing gets in those gearings. Alright, so you can try and clean up the edges a little bit, but honestly, if you just rotate the drum a few times and kind of go back and forth, it'll break loose, and then you can kind of get a grip on it and pull it. So you should have, ooh, that's gross. You should have somewhat of a gasket. I think it's right here, but it's stuck to it. So there's a gasket right here that I'm gonna go ahead and peel off, but most of this will just be liquid gasket we're gonna peel off and scrape off. So this will come straight out. Like I said, if you want to grab some gloves or another rag just to grab it, I'll show you what I do once I pull it out, but we're just gonna set this aside somewhere clean because you don't want dirt or anything in the teeth of this thing. So what you can do is you can kind of take this and put a non-pilling shop rag over the top, and then I usually just wrap it in zip ties like so. So at this point you might assume that you can go ahead and take off the drum, but unfortunately we're not at that point. So you will see a kind of unique looking spindle nut here with 6 prongs, and so what you will need is you are going to need to go to your auto parts store and get something like this. It's about 13 to 14 bucks. It is an axle, spindle, 6-prong removal socket, whatever. So if you just look up that, you'll go ahead and find it. But 1/2-inch drive, but there is a sort of retainer here on it. You'll notice that there's a bunch of prongs all around, and I need to clean this up a little bit. Get all this goop off of it. Here's that washer I was telling you about. I'll clean it up. It's a metal one. I can reuse it. But you'll see some of these are hugging on and some of them aren't, but they are rested against. This one is hugging on, and so all I'll need to do is I just need to get like a screwdriver of sorts, and then I will just sort of pry this out of the way like so, but it's easier with 2 hands. And then I'll show you where these grooves come in handy when we're putting it back on. But you can rotate your drum a little bit if you need to get better access to certain parts of it, but right now we're really just getting that out of the way, and then I'll probably move these just so there's not any friction against it, and then we'll go ahead and get this removed. Alright, so we got our tabs out of the way, so we're going to go ahead and use our specialty tool here. So the prongs don't go very deep, so it's not really going to be all that tight, but I would still use a breaker bar just so you get that kind of like added torque. And then it should kind of break free, and then the rest of it you can sort of hand loosen off just because there's tons of oil in here that makes it a little bit easy. So we're going to go ahead and use that 1/2 inch breaker bar drive, break it loose, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so once we're done with our rotary phone here, we're going to go ahead and expose that retaining clip that we had. So we're going to make sure that we set this aside somewhere where it's not going to get dirty. So if you have a bag from your recent trip to the store, then that works, but then this is going to go ahead, pop out like so, and then, surprise, surprise, there's another one. So same concept, except this one doesn't have a retaining clip behind it, but we're going to once again put our tool in there, break it loose, and then hand loosen it off. Alright, so we are ready to go ahead and take the drum off now. Keep in mind that if you put on the parking brake so that you can remove the axle bolts, go ahead and disengage that, otherwise you're not really going to be able to get this off. If it fights you any more than that, feel free to give it some careful suggestions around the way. It should come off just fine. The other things to remember, this is actually really heavy on the C3500s. I know what you're thinking, even for me, but if you use a jack or if you're just careful so you don't drop it on your foot and end up with a weird nickname, you'll be just fine. The other thing to keep in mind is anytime you're working with drum brakes, there's going to be brake dust. Definitely don't want to breathe that in, it's very hazardous, so go ahead and pop on a mask that you normally paint with, get it removed, put a bucket underneath, spray it with brake clean, and you should be just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. I'll show you what I was doing on the other side, just so you can kind of see that part, and then I'll let you go. So other than the fun spindle nuts, it's just the same as any other drum brake. So if you're hoping to see me disassemble this, I won't be on this. I'm just showing the removal of the brake itself. But if you find any other video that shows the drum brake springs and whatnot, it is the exact same thing. But let me show you what I was doing. Boom. There you go. So I'm painting it black just because I'm painting my rims right now, and this obviously sticks out, so I want to go ahead and make that look nice as well. So a couple tips when you're putting everything back together, just make sure the drum is fully seated all the way back before you start putting on your spindle nuts. You're not going to really get a whole lot of torque out of it just because the prongs will kind of slide out, so it's very important that this is fully seated back before you put that first one. And don't forget the order. You're going to put all this back, you're going to put one spindle nut, and then you're going to put that retaining clip, and then you're going to put the second spindle nut, right? Everything's going to be nice and torqued, and then you're going to clamp with the spindle nuts around. So those grooves that you saw on the inside, when you rotate your drum, you'll actually be able to get some leverage to have sort of your screwdriver push up into that groove and then push the tab into that nut. Hopefully you can visualize that. I apologize for just kind of going over it verbally. But the other thing to remember is you are going to use some like ultra black gasket, oil resistant one. You're going to want that from Permatex. Important thing, if you've never used liquid gasket before, is you're going to want that metal gasket as well. But you're going to go ahead and put it on both sides, right? And then you're going to put your axle, press it all the way in, and then you're going to hand tighten these. So you're going to get it nice and snug, but you're not going to actually torque anything initially. So get it hand torqued, right? Pressed. Then you're going to let it cure overnight, and then you'll actually do your ratchet to tighten these, and then just alternate as you're putting it on. So that's very important, so that way you don't squeeze all of that gasket out before it actually has a chance to hold. So keep that in mind, but that should be it. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one. Feel free to like and subscribe.